Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Will the ghost of the Dark Knight ever go away? As I have 2 hours to go until I see the Batman for a second time, I thought I'd discuss this. In reviews of the Batman we had this week, how many times did you hear them compare it with the Dark Knight? Quite a few, I would imagine. The ones I read couldn't stop talking about the Dark Knight and saying it's just below the Dark Knight, it's equally as good as the Dark Knight. I can't remember many reviewers saying that the Batman is better than the Dark Knight. And that's interesting. And I haven't made my mind up because the Dark Knight isn't the be-all and end-all for me. This is something that directors have had an issue with when making Superman, being compared to Superman the movie. Man of Steel had that problem, Superman Returns had that problem, and every Superman TV show. The ghost of that damn film never goes away. Now, I call it that damn film. It's an amazing film. Not only is it a great Superman film, it's the first real, true blue superhero movie. And it's great. And I understand why people hold it in such high regard. I understand why people hold the Dark Knight in such high regard. But surely there has to come a time when a film is judged on its own merits and not compared to the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is a sequel. The Batman, whether you call it an origin movie or not, it is an origin movie, yeah? Because it's the first one. It's the first introduction. It doesn't matter, whether they did do the whole Wayne's getting killed again, which they didn't, right? But it's a big theme within the movie or not. It's still an origin movie. So why are they comparing an origin movie with a sequel? Now, let's not forget, Batman Begins wasn't a successful movie. Now, reviews were often quite good, but the movie just didn't make the money. And I mean, I can give you excuses and reasons for that. It's because people still had a hangover from Batman and Robin and weren't ready to embrace a Batman movie, because Batman Begins is probably my joint favourite Batman movie. I think Batman Begins is a sensational movie and so underrated. It's amazing. But you could ask the question, why is the Dark Knight hailed while Batman Begins isn't? That's another question. Well, what happens is, a legend begins, propaganda begins. The Dark Knight, the best superhero movie, the best thing ever. And this becomes, the loudest voices always become the most heard voices in fandoms, on the internet, and that becomes a bit of a problem. Really, that's a separate subject on having a debate if the Dark Knight, in fact, is as good as people say it is. I mean, I have my doubts about that. But the thing is, will the ghost of this film ever stop haunting anyone who makes a Batman film or has Batman in their movie? They did the same thing to Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Again, it was a sequel, it was a second movie, but actually it was the introduction to the DCEU's Batman. So we know that critics were torn on Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. But everyone admitted that Affleck was a great Batman and a lot better than they imagined him to be. It's the same with the Batman. Robert Pattinson is being hailed as a much better Batman than anyone imagined him to be. And that's another thing, isn't it? This thing about Twilight and, why are they getting this Twilight actor to be Bruce Wayne? Well, he's an actor, so he's not going to play Edward Cullen in every single movie. There has to be some emotional intelligence in life. You have to understand what acting is, and some people don't understand that acting is pretending to be a caricature, right? And this time, Rob was being Bruce Wayne and Batman really well, under the tutelage and leadership of a great director with a definite vision. You see, that's another discussion, isn't it? Bloggers and critics, talking about the mainstream audience. Well, the Batman wasn't made for a mainstream audience. The Batman was made by a stan, for stans. Let's get it absolutely clear. And I think there's no doubt about that. Now, if the general audience is going to enjoy this film, that makes me very happy, because I want a DC movie and a Batman movie to do as well as possible. Whether the ghost of the Dark Knight ever goes away, I don't know. I don't think it should be held up so high. I don't think it should be, when you're doing a review, you shouldn't say, well, it's not the Dark Knight. I mean, how does any critic, respect themselves as an analyst of media, of entertainment, of film, of television, if you're going to vote a film down because it's not the Dark Knight? But if it was exactly the same as the Dark Knight, you know what they would have said? Oh, no imagination, nothing new here. Some of them are even saying there's nothing new in the Dark Knight, which is outrageous. Sorry, nothing new in the Batman, which is an outrageous statement to make. Oh, it was all done in the Nolan movies. Let's have a comparison here, because I don't think you can compare the Batman with any other Batman movie or, live action stuff. But as Batman Begins is the first movie in a trilogy, and the Batman is the first movie in hopefully a trilogy, hopefully even more than that, let's look at them. You see, the Batman goes where Batman Begins was afraid to go. All the themes from Batman Begins are in the Batman, in the Batman, but Nolan never took them as far as Matt Reeves has. And that's the difference. Matt Reeves is going very deeper with the corruption. The corruption was there in Batman Begins, but they didn't, they didn't go deep enough. You got Flask, he's taking bribes. He's partnered up with Jim Gordon. Jim Gordon says, I'm not a rat. You remember all of that. But it isn't taken deeper enough, because that's not what Christopher Nolan wanted to do. Ultimately, Batman Begins isn't made for stands. Batman Begins is made for the general audience and for stands. Batman Begins is a bit like the DCEU with the Snyderverse. They put Batman in the real world. And they asked the question, what would happen if Batman was real? So Nolan's take is great, but it was still made as a popcorn chomping flick. Yes, it had deep themes, it was dark, it was gritty, but nowhere near what the Batman has done. And you see, you should never attack one film for not going where another film goes. You shouldn't attack one director for being different. They shouldn't have attacked Zack Snyder for doing something different. Because BVS by many people is seen as an art house CBM, which it is. And the Batman is an art house CBM. Is the Dark Knight an art house CBM? It's a bit of a play, isn't it? It is made like a play. And it's a very interesting film with very interesting themes, with a great version of the Joker and a great version of Gotham and Christian Bale's Batman. It's all great. But how can you compare the Dark Knight with the Batman? First of all, that's an origin movie. That's the first movie. So it's not really fair to hit the Batman with the ghost of the Dark Knight. I don't think the ghost of the Dark Knight is ever going to go away. These people are going to clench hold of it. They're going to hold that damn man's legend, Christopher Nolan's, until they're in their graves, and hit everyone who does anything Batman with it over the head. And that's the problem, because intelligent people don't look at a work of art and say, oh, it's not that, so I'm not going to like it. I'm going to vote it rotten. Instead of looking at the content at hand, you judge each piece of art for what it is. The Batman isn't the Dark Knight. The Batman is taking Batman Begins and expanding on it. But it's so very, very different. Because even though Bale's Bruce Wayne and Batman are tortured souls in Batman Begins, it's nowhere as near as Reeves takes the tortured soul in the Batman. Because it really is deep. And you feel this dual personality thing seeping out when he's dressed as Batman. And he's dressed as Batman quite a lot in the movie. But what we need to do with art is say that we enjoyed something that came before on the same subject matter, but say this is different. You can like it or dislike it, but you shouldn't form an opinion on a previous work of art. This has been Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this perfection. And I'll see you again tonight on my live The Batman spoiler chat after I've seen the film for a second time. Until then, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.